Deputy Adams.
Can I say, Taoiseach, in the same spirit and for the record, that Sinn Féin supports the call for an independent inquiry into the deaths, the tragic deaths of infants in Portlaoise and the treatment of their parents. My question today is about the plight of other citizens, those who are living in flooded areas. And if I may, I want to begin by commending those communities who rallied to the aid of their neighbours, those who were involved in clothes collections and making food available, in distributing sandbags and looking after particularly elderly citizens, all before officialdom got mobilised, demonstrate the very, very best qualities of the Irish people. I also want to commend the frontline services. But, for many parts of the country, flooding incidents are nothing new. Parts of Cork, City and County, Waterford, Limerick, here in Dublin, frequently experience significant flooding, and with climate change, with rising sea levels, increased rainfall, that is expected to get worse in the years ahead. It's now 5 years since Cork City experienced some of the worst flooding ever seen on this island, with thousands of homes and businesses damaged, yet the city still does not have adequate flood defences. It's the same in Limerick, where mostly working-class people have been totally devastated by the destruction of their homes and their belongings. Now, most of these people are not able to get insurance. The insurance companies will not cover them. So what is required immediately is financial aid for those worst hit by this latest crisis. So, Taoiseach, will you give a commitment that the government will provide adequate assistance to those householders affected by these floods who have no assurance? And will you also tell the Dáil what level of financial assistance will be provided by the state to the many households which have been left devastated by the floods, and when such assistance will be made available?
Thank you, Deputy.
Deputy Adams, for raising this matter. On the 1st of February, the exceptional high tides, exceptional storms and exceptional rainfall over the last couple of weeks caused particular damage and disruption in the western, southern and southeastern region. This is not the first time we've had flooding in various parts of the country, the Shannon, the Blackwater, other areas, but this was unprecedented in its scale and in its power of destruction. I too agree with you in respect of the response from communities, from neighbours, from emergency services who worked day and night to rescue people and ease the discomfort and the problems that people were experiencing. There were 300 homes flooded in the St Mary's Park and the King's Island areas in Limerick, some of which were visited yesterday by Minister Hayes and Minister Noonan. Between 1,200 and 2,000 people are affected by the flooding in Limerick, and 60 residents were evacuated from their homes. There was also flooding, of course, in Cork and Waterford and in Wexford, and quite a number of coastal areas with consequent damage on roads, graveyards, piers, sea walls breached and so on like that. Areas of Drogheda have also been flooded. But this is a problem that is now in a state of continuity, Deputy Adams. The weather forecast for this evening and tomorrow is not great for some areas either. Whether this be a consequence of climate change or not is something that obviously we've got to consider. So there are issues that are of immediate concern, issues of interim concern, and then the consequences of what you do on a long-term basis with structural changes for the provision of defences, if that be so. I visited Spanish Arch in Galway yesterday, medieval part of the city, low-lying. The power of the water coming out of Lough Corrib was indescribable in terms of its ferocity. Been pumping in there for the last number of months. But even if you had walls right down to the open sea of 5 or 6 feet in height, when it meets the tide that is 20 feet higher than normal, it backs up inevitably, and consequently the drainage into the river in the first place backs up into the streets. This is of enormous consequence for people. So let me just say, the government considered this morning. The Minister for Social Protection and the government have put together now a humanitarian fund of 15 million pending assessment for immediate causes for hardship, discomfort, relocation and so on of people who need it now. So the following will apply, Deputy Adams. The local committees of the local authorities have already been out calling house to house to people who are affected here to assess the structural damage and the humanitarian circumstances that apply. That's worked in conjunction with the local community organisations, Vincent de Paul, community councils, residents' associations, and so on. That's then reported to the Department of Social Protection, who have already made payments in a number of areas for immediate relief in terms of food or clothing, and when houses begin to dry out, for provision of white goods and basic furniture and so on like that. The Ballynanty Centre in Limerick will remain open until late with information on local rallies and so on, where people can make their contacts. So it's not possible, as you know, to put basics into houses that are still flooded or that are not dried out. And as the days go on now, clearly the high tides may well abate, but these things are unpredictable. In Galway, the surge with the westerly wind increased the tide by almost 2 metres on top of an abnormally high tide in any event. So that structure is in place now, Deputy Adams. And next Thursday we have a special meeting in regard to jobs. An update will be given by the emergency response section of the department under Minister Hogan on the update. And next Tuesday, Minister Hayes and Minister Hogan and other ministers will have more accurate assessments from all the local authorities on the scale and the requirements that need to be dealt with. But there are immediate problems, humanitarian, people out of houses, having to relocate to other accommodation, families, sons and daughters or whatever. The question then of other structural damages that have occurred throughout the country. So it's a case that's obviously government are taking a very active approach on.
Deputy Adams.
Well, two issues arise here. First of all, my question was about those people who have not been able to get insurance. You totally avoided that issue. In fact, some people, I'm advised, thought they were insured for flood damage and discovered they're not, and others just can't get insurance. The same thing happened in the city of Dublin here a year or two ago, so I would ask you to focus in on that question, that this is not the people's fault if their homes are devastated. How do they replace possessions, furniture, televisions, carpets, beds, bedding, linen, and so on and so forth? The other thing is around just the state's response. I mean, the government doesn't appear to be capable of strategic planning. I remember during the fodder crisis last year, Sinn Féin argued that the government needed to put in place contingencies for the consequences of severe weather, and that doesn't appear to have been done this time. And, you know, the Office of Public Works have already done a risk assessment on coastal erosion. That's been done. Now, the onus appears to be on the local authority to sort this out, but you talk about 15 million. Pardon the pun, but 15 million is a drop in the ocean. You have taken 320 million out of the local government fund. So how can a local authority deal with a crisis of this dimension when you're taking money out of it? And it's all was the same old story. There's lots of money for consultants, and irony of ironies, consultants in Uisce Éireann. There's money for bankers, there's money for politicians, but there's none for citizens in need. So back to my initial question, will those folks, through no fault of their own, who are not insured, be assisted by the government? And then secondly, what about strategic planning, and how can we take you seriously when you have not put in place any of the contingencies, which we already know there's going to be more severe weather in the time ahead?
See, I think you maybe misunderstand what I was saying, Deputy Adams. The initial response of government, which consider the matter today, is for the humanitarian issues that arise now. And government have put in place the 15 million fund pending assessment to deal with the humanitarian issues immediately. And that's why the emergency response unit of the Department of the Environment, together with the local authorities and their committees, working with the agencies, the community organisations, residents' associations, Vincent de Paul and so on, are collating the information about structural damage and the human circumstances that apply in cases that are flooded. We know exactly where they are. I've outlined some of them here. So that's a 15 million fund for humanitarian only issues pending assessment. The issue of structural damage and capital resources needed. There have been about 250 million spent in the last 4 years on capital works here. Like you remember Clonmel, Kevin Hill will be aware of this, and down in Fermoy and other places in Kilkenny, where it's taken a long time to put the fences in place. Now, I was down I walked Berthrop Beach myself there just a number of weeks ago, and what took 10,000 years to put in place was gone in 12 hours with the open Atlantic Ocean. Or Glen Bay down in Kerry or other places where you've had damage inflicted on, movement of cliffs and cliff edges. But that's a different, more long-term operation. How do you provide for longer-term defences in Clontarf or in Limerick or in Galway or in Cork, which has been flooded now on a number of occasions? Businesses that I met yesterday flooded 3 times in 3 years. There is no insurance after the first claim comes in, and that's an issue, obviously, that's of great concern to people in business. One woman said to me yesterday she's now going to be closed until the end of April to repair the latest flood which came yesterday morning. It's going to cost over 250,000 to repair the damage in a medieval building which soaks up water like a sponge. So government are very serious about this, Deputy Adams. The 15 million is for humanitarian issues now, and the structure is there to deal with it. We'll have an update on Thursday and a full report insofar as we can have that, with details, scale, costs, impact right across the country from Minister Hayes and Minister Noonan on next Tuesday, and the government will respond in the best way that we can here. We will make an application if that's appropriate to Europe. I heard a spokeswoman on this morning saying that you can collate the damages all over the country into a single application. We'll consider that based on the extent of what's needed here.
Thank you. Deputy Healy.